Yes. I think our friend Grant Cameron would have a lot to say about this actually, because it's really about consciousness. We could be walking around kind of oblivious in paradise, but when we have a little knowledge and wake up, we become discerning, more divine. It's divine to be in bliss and not know, but when you awaken knowledge, then we could really understand the world. And I think that's part of evolution. So, anyway, this
So
was the
Grant's in
great
the house if
session.
you want to introduce Grant.
Yeah, Grant Cameron is in the house. But I just want to say, there he is. Grant, how you been? Wait, you're muted. We want to hear everything.
Hear me?
I can hear you. We
Yes.
can hear you.
Good. Super.
Good.
Yeah, things are good. So let's
Let's
do the thing. I got some weird stuff to talk about. So let's.
Right. I also am going to call you about a bigger conference, but I'll do that after this. We'll talk about it like tomorrow. I'll give you a call. But yeah, Grant Cameron. Do you want to say anything about Grant, Neil? Because he's
Just been working with Grant for so long. He always shows up, has so much insight into many things. When we first started working together, it was really much about the disclosure and even the WikiLeaks. We did a bunch of events on that, and I just love the way Grant has evolved into really focusing on what really matters, which is the experiencer. And it's about what we've been saying so often these days, is that what is beyond the nuts and bolts, what is beyond the fact that they exist, who are behind these vehicles, what are the experiences that are happening, and what does this mean for humanity. So I just like that Grant, it really is full spectrum when it comes to disclosure. Consciousness, spirituality, the government, it really brings it all together.
right. And it's so exciting, whatever Grant comes up with, because, he's looked at the big picture, right? He went from nuts and bolts to like this whole immaterial realm, apports, metaphysical, paranormal. So he covers it all. So we really want to know what weird stuff you have for us today, Grant. What did you find?
Okay, so let me share my screen and we'll start.
Yes,
Okay, hang
you
on.
got that. And also talk a little bit about the latest FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, Pentagon, 1,500 pages dump, if you want.
Okay, we'll talk a
Later.
little bit about.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Okay,
okay.
so you see my screen?
Well, it's not, it's on, put it on, yeah, that's better. There you go.
Okay.
Okay, we see it.
Okay, so I'll begin. I have 5 books coming out whenever, and maybe a 6th book. This is one of the books that I was working on, and I'll start with this, and we'll get into consciousness, and we'll get into evil aliens and all this kind of stuff that's sort of prominent in the UFO world right now. But this is critically important because for whatever reason, I have had a series of people come to me claiming they've flown the craft. And I think I'm the only one that's got these people. People may have the odd one or whatever, but they just all seem to appear to me. So the book that will be coming out has 36 people, and this includes John Ramirez from the CIA. It includes 747 United Airlines pilot. It includes a retired U.S. Air Force colonel out of Los Angeles. A bunch of people at different levels. But before I begin, I want to sort of pay tribute to Robin Foy, who has just passed away. I have talked about a number of things I'm going to talk about today that I think are extremely important, that the UFO community has sort of missed the boat in terms of everybody's interested into interesting stories. They want to hear the latest UFO thing, who's the latest video, all this kind of stuff. And in many regards, I think we're sort of missing the boat of what's actually going on. Robin Foy was very important because I think that physical mediumship is extremely important to understand how reality actually works. And Robin Foy did he was responsible for the skull experiment, if you've ever seen the documentary. And he has just passed away. And to show you the power of the physical and the connection between the physical and the non-physical, the spiritual world, whatever you want to call, I always refer people to the interview I did with Leslie Kane, where I asked her about the hand. I said, Leslie, tell me the story about the hand. Tell me what happened with the hand. And she describes this situation where she's sitting at this table with a red light under the table, and this sort of watery stuff starts to appear on the table, and this hand appears, an arm appears, and it's right there. She said, I can feel it. I can feel the knuckles. It's warmer than an ordinary hand. It's soft, like almost like a baby's hand. But she said it's absolutely a hand, and it sits there, and then it bangs on the table, and then it just sort of disappears back into wherever it came from. And she said she has seen this a number of times. That is critically important because that basically shows you that whatever phenomena we are dealing with doesn't live in this physical reality. It lives in some other reality, and it can pop in and it can pop back out. And Robin Foy and all the experiments he did with the skull, with all, if you've seen all the material that was going on in Great Britain in the 1990s, tremendous amount of material that shows a critically important thing that I think the UFO community has sort of overlooked. And that is this idea that it's all connected, whether you're talking physical mediumship, whether you're talking UFOs, whether you're talking paranormal phenomena, it's all one thing. We're parsing it. That's what Ray Hernandez's original vision was with Free when he had a conversation with me, and I gave a consciousness lecture a couple of days later. He was taken into the field driving down the freeway in Miami, and he was basically shown it's all connected. You got to quit parsing this stuff. It's all the same thing. So I want to pay tribute to Robin Foy, who did a lot of important work that I think people should take a good look at, because it is definitely connected to the UFO phenomena. My story today started with Pam Dupuis. This is Pam Dupuis, has now passed on. I owe most of what I'm going to talk about today to Pam Dupuis. She's the one that got me going. After I gave my first consciousness lecture in 2013 in Phoenix, Arizona, after my 2012 experience, there was basically told with absolute certainty this has all got to do with consciousness. I was put in contact with Pam Dupuis. I didn't know who she was. They said, "Are you going to talk to Pam?" I said, "I guess so." She came to this house on the Monday, and she basically started to talk about being an abductee and doing remote viewing for the U.S. government and this and that and whatever. And I'd heard all these stories. And at that point, she said, "Oh yeah, and last night I was flying the craft." And at that point, I never heard anything like this in my life. And I thought, this is absolutely insane. I still think it's insane. It's, I guess, what Jacques Vallée would call absurd. If you're going to make up a story, why would you put something so stupid into the story? Is the fact, "Oh yeah, I got to fly the craft." My first instinct when she told me this was, I said, like, come on, it's like Arab women at that point, you couldn't drive a car. I mean, you had to have your brother or a man in the car in order to drive a car. I mean, and you're saying that the if you get taken by the intelligence, whatever it is, they'll let you fly the craft without training, without license, without insurance, nothing. You just, hey, drive the craft, let's fly around the universe here. And it just seems so absurd. And so she was the first one to tell me this. And then what happened is these people started to come to me one after another after another. And I would keep it very quiet. In the last maybe 6 months or a year, I've started to release what I've been told. But until that point, I really didn't tell anybody that I was recording these stories from these people. And basically, they're telling a very, very similar story about how this whole thing works. And it's extremely important to realize, because then once you understand how this works, you understand what may be going on. This is one of the most important slides I think I've ever seen. This is a painting that was done of an out-of-body experience. Now, if you look at the free survey of 3,200 experiencers that was done by Edgar Mitchell, Ray Hernandez, and all those people, 80% of people who are experiencers say that had an out-of-body experience. I have not, but I realize the importance of the out-of-body experience. Again, the out-of-body experience is going to be the same thing. It's the same thing as a near-death experience. It's the same thing as lucid dreaming. It's all these sort of things where you move into this alternate reality. The importance of this is, this painting is, you have this girl who's out of her body and she's looking back. And this is critically important. It's like, I call it the 1492 dilemma. And that is, what if the world was actually flat? What if the sun actually did go around the earth? What if everything was actually solid? What if we weren't moving at 1,000 miles an hour into the east? And what if there were only 5,000 stars? What would it look like? It would look exactly the same way it does now. It's interpretation. So we're in a dilemma right now where we are making interpretations about what we're seeing, and it's not true. So we have this idea, oh, you have God created the heaven and the earth, and he created a human being, and then he put the soul in there, and he put consciousness inside the brain, and the brain looks out the eyes, and it sees what's going on, and it lives its life. The out-of-body experience completely proves that wrong. So you have the girl, she's looking back at her body, and what does she see? She sees her body, but more important, she sees her head, and she sees her brain. So she's got awareness. Now, it may be contained in an astral body, but it's still just awareness. So the awareness is looking back at the body and seeing the brain. So is consciousness in the brain? No, it's not. Is the awareness in the brain? No, it's not. It's floating above the body, or it's seemingly above the body. It's looking back. Consciousness is there. And what you have to realize is that, as Deepak Chopra has said so many times, and wisdom going back 5,000 years have said, this is like illusion. This is the fact that the body is in the awareness, not the other way around. We want to interpret it and say our awareness is in our body. We see through our eyes, we feel through our hands and stuff. No, the body is in the awareness. The awareness is looking at the body. It's looking at the brain. It's looking at the head. The awareness is not in the brain. What's even more important, if you look at the side, say that was a window, you could have your awareness floating around, and you could go and look out the window. And what would you see? You would see the moon. You would see that mountain. The mountain is in your awareness. The moon is in your awareness. It's not out there. It's in your awareness. You could look out and see the stars. The stars are in your awareness. And recently we've had this whole debate about galaxies. And I pointed out 100 years ago, we only believed there was one galaxy. And Hubble, when he came forward and said the Andromeda, he was talking about the Andromeda galaxy. He had a lot of fight. They said it's not a galaxy, you get lost. Now it went up to 200 billion galaxies, and now the science suddenly said, oh, we made a mistake. There's 2 trillion galaxies. So the 2 trillion galaxies, where are the 2 trillion galaxies? They're in the awareness. We're saying, oh no, it's out there. There's just time and space, and it's out there. But the out-of-body experience, if you understand what's actually going on here, that the awareness, everything is in that awareness. Here's one that ties it into the UFO issue. Betty Andreasson, who just recently passed away, had 6 books written on her. I was honored to, at one point, interview her, but I can't find the interview. She had an experience where she has this long experience. They take her here, they take her there. They're taking her all over the place. This elder and this gray guy, small gray guy, are taking her around, and she goes back. And she goes back exactly the same thing that Chris Bledsoe talked about. That Chris Bledsoe said that in the 2007 experience, he was moved around Egypt, and he was shown all this stuff. And he said it seemed like it took 4 months. It was actually 4 hours he was gone, and he was in a glass orb. He could look out, and he was in this glass orb. So Betty Andreasson talks about this glass orb as well, that she's taken back to her house after this experience in this glass orb. So they land her in the backyard. She gets out of this glass orb, and this is what she says. I ran to the trailer door, happy to be home. I headed for the bedroom where Bob was still sleeping. As I reached my side of the bed, I was shocked as I saw myself sitting there. Yet I was standing there beside myself. I slipped into my resting body. So this comes to this whole thing about abduction. What's really going on? Do we actually think, is it actually like the sun is actually going around the earth? This is how we interpret it. We are being grabbed and we are being taken physically out of the body. But when you start to look at this sort of stuff, you see a lot of really weird stuff in terms of the body floating, going through walls, which shouldn't happen if they were actually moving you in a physical state. And Betty Andreasson, you got to remember, she had 6 books written on her. She had a lot of experience about this, and a lot of experiences will tell you this. They'll say, I don't think I was abducted. They come to me in my dreams. Or Bashar says, we come to you in your dreams because now you're in our world. And this is this whole interpretation of the 1492 dilemma. What's really going on? What are we actually seeing? What is actual reality? And the more I look at it, the more I realize what I was told, and I've only had a couple of very direct inspirational events where I was given material, and in the one it was clear as day. I was told, you have not got a clue. Everything that you think is wrong. In fact, it's exactly the opposite of what you think it is. And that's what we always have to keep in the back of our mind, is we're being given these ideas in the physical world, and we're rehashing these ideas that we've been taught as we got brought up. And we've twisted it around. René Descartes, who came up with the scientific method, actually said, people say, well, you got to be skeptical. And so René Descartes, the way he described it, if you go back and describe it, is no, you don't have to be skeptical of new ideas. You have to be skeptical of your old ideas. That's what he said. I need to tear down everything I've believed. And that's, I think, what we've got to do. We've got to realize that a lot of the stuff we believe, that we have gathered and put together, is wrong. It's wrong. And what the paranormal phenomena is showing us is there's something to discover here. If the world was the way we say it would be, these things would not be happening. It's the 5% that Gary Nolan talks about outside the curve. You look at the 5%, the anomalies, and that will tell you why something is happening. It's not the person is telling a lie, it's the person is telling the truth, and they're giving you a hint that something you believe is not right. So you have this constant thing about out-of-body experiences involving experiencers, and 80% of experiencers say they've had out-of-body experiences. Now, here's Seth. I've gone now back in the recent years to channelers. I really believe strongly in channelers, in the material that, because they're all basically saying the same thing. People say, oh, they all said different stuff. Absolute garbage. I have read this stuff. They're all saying the same thing. And here's this idea that if we go back to this, Seth says, consciousness does not take up any space. You must understand this. So if awareness is there and awareness is looking back at the body, awareness is consciousness. It doesn't take up any space. It's all there at that one point in space and time, or whatever you want to call it. It's just there. How big is the universe? It's no bigger. It doesn't have any space at all. We're making these assumptions that there's this huge universe when in fact consciousness is all there is, this awareness, and it doesn't take up any space. So Seth is another one. This is this idea that we believe that we're in these physical bodies and the spirits are coming to us. Seth said to Jane Roberts, I am in this room, although I have no object within which you can place me. You are just as disembodied as I am. You have a vehicle to use, a body that you can call your own, and that is all. We're all disembodied, and from time to time we'll go into a body and we'll occupy this body. But we are all the same thing. We're these essences that make up the one, or as Bashar says, the one is the all are the one. I've pushed this for many years. I'm not getting very far, but I'm absolutely certain that this is going to be true. I talked about an experiment. I talked about it with Alan a couple times. J.Z. Knight did a test a number of years ago. Ramtha, who she was channeling, wanted to do this test. She did 3 DNA tests. She did one, and did 3 different samples, one when she was completely normal, one when she was channeling Ramtha. And what these 3 different labs brought back was the fact that when she was normal, she was a female with French background, I think it was. And when she was channeling, her DNA completely changed. She was male, had a male DNA, and she had she was from Iceland or some sort of thing like that. It was completely different. So everybody would say, okay, Jane Roberts made the story up. It's all garbage, whatever. It made sense, because if you know with people who have multiple personality disorders, you'll hear these stories all the time. Oh, the person's eye color changed. They didn't have the disease. One could see, one couldn't see properly, had to wear glasses, all this kind of stuff. That's all DNA. And so we have this understanding, oh, DNA is this physical thing and it programs us and whatever. This destroys that idea. It basically says you got to rethink DNA. What is DNA actually? If everything is consciousness, you've got to start forgetting about the physical aspect of this thing. And you got to realize there may be an aspect that all you're seeing is a reflection of something that is much more intricate and much more complex. So she had this test. So I said, everybody said, don't listen to her. No. I said, well, why don't we just do another experiment? Why don't we just go out there and look? If it's not true, we should be easily able to prove it. We can go to trans channelers, not sort of relay channelers who are relaying messages back and forth, because the channeler will still be in possession of their consciousness. But when you start looking at people who trans channel, so Lynn Buchanan is on the left-hand side. Now, these are stories that when I see them, I go, wow, this proves it again. Lynn Buchanan was given a target, remote viewing target, when he was in the military. He was given a target to go into Saddam Hussein's head. And he talked about this mind melding thing that they actually claim that the remote viewers can do this. They can get into somebody's head and they can try to change their ideas or whatever. He went into his head, and the report was, and he's talked about this a few times, when he got in Saddam Hussein's head, his eyes turned to brown. His eyes color changed. Paul Selleck on the right-hand side. Paul Selleck always talks about, and you'll hear him, if you hear him talk, he talks about it all the time. He says, when I channel, people say, my eyes turn this bright blue. And I've never seen it because I can't see it. But I ask people, did you see it? Oh, yeah, your eyes turned bright blue. So I knew there had to be some connection. And I'm thinking, he's talking about his spirit guides. And I waited, and finally he said it. I've seen my one spirit guide a number of times. And he's this guy, he had this scroll, and he describes this first time that he met him coming over this mountain, and it came down, and he had these bright blue eyes. And there you see it. So you got to question this thing, is how much is actually physical? Is consciousness actually DNA? And when you change the consciousness in the body and you have a trans channel and you put another consciousness in there, is that DNA going to change? If it does, the world is on its head. Everything people believe is going to be wrong. And I keep insisting that we run this experiment. I've tried it. I've talked to Bashar. He had agreed to do this test. There was a couple of people who had agreed to do this test. This would revolutionize the world if this turns out to be true, that when a transchannel channels, the DNA changes, and that would totally revolutionize the world, because we'd have to rethink the whole idea of physical DNA. Here's going back to this slide here. The thing is, what's really going on? What is, we assume we're sitting and looking out the eyes and we're interpreting stuff, and the soul is in the body and stuff like this. But if you take a look at what has happened in history, and I'm going to get more into talking about the first one, when Jesus is dealing with the Pharisees. Now people say, "Oh, skeptics, got to be a skeptic." Well, skeptics were around in the biblical days. The skeptics in the biblical day were the Pharisees. They were jabbing Jesus all the time, and they asked him about the kingdom of God. Okay, so when's kingdom of God coming? And I'll get in more detail, but I'll just give you the short version here. Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is within you." Physicist John Wheeler, he had two things. There's one thing he said: "There is no out there out there." Now, what did he mean by that? Is that the absolute concept that there is no out there out there? There's no time and space. This is all illusion. People have had a lot of debates about it. And he also had this other thing, was that reality did not come until something was observed. And he had one other thing, but it's just escaped my mind, where he understood this concept that it's much more complex than what you would see. Here's the one that Stephen Greer uses all the time. He talks in his meditation, he talks about the Sufi quote: "Does thou recognize self only as a puny form, when within thee the universe is enfolded? Is it true that your consciousness, you have the 2 trillion galaxies inside your consciousness, you have the stars, the planets, everything is inside your consciousness, or is it out there, out there?" And people seem to be indicating over and over again, it actually may just be all within yourself. If you talk to people, the head guy for out-of-body experiences, he said the same thing. When you have an out-of-body experience, you don't go out of your body, you go into your body. Everything is within you. And this is the concept that looks more like, as I go along, this looks like this is exactly what's going to be. And this turns everything upside down. That's why I'm saying it's like 1492. We haven't got a clue. We are absolutely out to lunch as to what we're doing. And all we're doing is taking the programmed, conditioned mind, and we're moving these blocks around and trying to make them work. And all the blocks are wrong. Here's Deepak Chopra. You are not in the world. The world is in you. So this is the concept where I think we're going with this whole thing. And then you can start to explain when the people are flying the craft. And I'll get into this. This is another one. Consciousness does not exist in the body. The body exists within your consciousness. Do you understand the difference? And I think that was Seth that said that. No, that's Bashar. Do you understand the difference? The body exists within your consciousness. And that's this idea of looking back from an out-of-body experience. The awareness, the consciousness is there, and everything is in that consciousness. Here's one of my sky pilots. This is the Peter Whitley from, he's the head of MUFON for Japan. His experience started by going to a session. He was always into meditation his whole life. He went to a session at the Monroe Institute and suddenly picked up out-of-body experience. He was able to do this at will. He could do it all the time. I think he said he had done 22 sessions the last time I interviewed him. He said he was going to start doing them again. But what he basically does, he goes into the out-of-body state, and then he goes and he goes on the ship. He goes to talk to the Greys. He can go wherever he wants. And you'll see this over and over again with people who have out-of-body experiences. They can go wherever they want. They can do whatever they want. The mind is the builder. Or as Bashar said, or not Bashar, Edgar Casey, the spirit is the life. The mind is the builder, and the physical is the result. So he can go in an out-of-body state and he go onto the craft. And in this book, and I call it the UFO Sky Pilot, the book, he tells his story of going on, interacting, how they pull material, all engagements he had, and it's all done through out-of-body experience. All his stuff is done through out-of-body experience. Here's Rebecca Castle, who was the one involved with John Podesta with trying to get a meeting for Edgar Mitchell with Edgar Mitchell about UFOs with Barack Obama. She's flown the craft, and she talks the same thing. And everybody will repeat the same thing. The craft is alive. The craft is a conscious being. She puts her hands on this panel, and whatever she thinks is what the craft does. And I think she did that as a small child. So she's one of them. Here's Gerald Pratt from Liverpool, England, another one that basically says this is out-of-body experience. And he talks about being on the craft, and these people are flying the craft, and he says, can I have a go at it? And he said a couple of important things, which you'll see cross over into all the other paranormal phenomena, is he said as soon as he was told to put his hand on a panel on the wall. As soon as he put his hand on the panel, he said, I could suddenly see in 360 degrees. This is something you'll see in out-of-body experience, near-death experience. You'll see it all over the place. This is another one of these absurd things that Jacques Vallée talks about. This is not something you want to make up. Oh, I could see in 360 degrees. This is absolutely nuts. But people in out-of-body experiences, in these abduction experiences on board the ship, will say, I could see in 360 degrees. And that's what he said. And he lifted the craft up, and he said he could suddenly see through the walls of the craft. As soon as he put his hand on the panel, he became one with the craft. And whatever he thought is what the craft does. So his mind just basically told it what he wanted to do. Here's Chris Bledsoe. Chris Bledsoe is very famous for his experience. When I heard he'd flown the craft, I said, Chris, I don't stop talking. I want to get this on tape. I phoned him up on Skype. I recorded the phone conversation. I've got it on my UFO consciousness podcast. And he tells the whole story in 5 minutes. He talks about very bizarre things. He talks about the fact that the craft is alive. The craft is a conscious being. And that when he went into the craft, it was multiple times bigger on the inside as it was. Terry Lovelace tells the same story, that it was the size of a football field inside. Hal Puthoff has talked about this. I've always wondered how do people describe this? That when they go in the craft, it's way bigger inside the craft than it is outside. Then you're starting to look at the fact this may not be as physical as you think it is. This may be something else. And even Bashar, I think, well, I may have it coming up here, but here's what Chris said. You become a part of that machine, that metal, that ship. It almost has like a soul to it. The craft does. It maybe becomes you into the future, into the machine somehow. It is very intelligent. And he talked about this, and everybody, it's almost like they're reading off a cue card. They're all telling the same sort of story. The craft is alive. You become one with the craft, and whatever you think is what the craft does. Here's Chris's drawing that he made for me. This is there was 4 beings. He was standing on the far wall there. There's a panel board on the right-hand side there, and there's this pedestal. And what he was told is to put his hand on this pedestal. And he said once he put his hand on the pedestal, these lights started to come off the pedestal, and you could see where his handprint was, and different variations. And then these octagon things started to swirl in the walls, and the craft started getting these octagons got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then all of a sudden the window opened up, and he said, I was cross-legged on the floor, looking out the window, flying down the Cape Fear River, a couple of inches off the water. And that's where he'd been taken in 2007, going, yahoo, and flying this craft with not touching anything, sitting there, and the whole craft is moving at his will. Here's what Bashar says. So you see these parallels over and over again. Everybody's starting to talk about the same thing, almost like the veil is thinned, and we're about to learn this thing. Our ships, this is Bashar talking, our ships, in a sense, are grown. It's what all the 36 people told me. The crafts are alive. They have this ability to shift their shape over and over again. This idea that the craft can be way bigger, and even within the cabin to provide what we need. So they can change the shape of it, the size of it, depending on what they need, when we need it. And when we don't need it, it simply absorbs back into the walls or the floors or the ceilings. It's all made out of the same seamless material, like it's grown. But it's the idea is they can change the ship to appear as whatever they want. And that's one of the problems we have with UFO sightings. Everybody's gathering these UFO sightings, not realizing that the UFO can appear as whatever it wants. There are almost no 2 UFOs that look the same. There are almost no 2 grays that look the same. It's almost like they look like leaves on a tree, but when you look close, you see, it's actually not the same, that they can change. And that would indicate a consciousness thing, that the consciousness is creating whatever shape they want, depending on what size they want or whatever they need. It's very, very plastic, almost like a psychedelic experience or a near-death experience, where you realize that it becomes very plastic and you are able to control the environment as to whatever you see is what appears. Here's Ron Johnson, who talked, and this is a parallel, crosses over into the spirit world. And there is this very direct connection to the spirit world. Ron Johnson has recorded this over 50 years. all his experiences over 50 years. This is LB. This is the being that he deals with. And he was told to fly the craft. He was told to sit in a seat, which a lot of people are, and put his fingers into these little holes in the seat. And he said the seat was as if it was built for him. It was completely fit his body. And I asked, what am I supposed to do? So the LB says, it's all inside you. All you have to do is think, and the ship will respond to what you want to do. It's all inside you. There is no out there. I said, like I'd like to go out in deep space and see the Milky Way from a distance. It took maybe a second or so, and all of a sudden, we come to a stop way out somewhere, and I'm looking at the Milky Way from a distance. 1 second to out there. So tell me that's physical. That's something else going on. And that's this idea, it's all within inside you, that you're moving around inside you. The whole reality, your whole existence is happening in your consciousness. And Ron points this out. He also pointed out another thing that, and you see this over and over again, when you start looking at his experiences, you see these parallels. So I'm talking to Ron, and he gets 3 visions in the spirit world. LB takes him in the spirit world. And the third one, he's with his mother. Second one, he's with his mother. He can't see his mother. Third one, he's with his mother. He's actually walking around with her in what he calls like a heavenly type place with, beautiful. And he says he's a LDS guy. So he says, my mother shows me this. It looks like a temple a small temple in Nephi, Utah. And she says, Ron, when you die, you're going to get a room in this building. And he said, when I went in the building, he said, it was the weirdest thing. He said it was like 10 to 100 times the size inside the building as it was outside the building. And I go, hey, I said to myself, hey, that's exactly what the UFO people are saying about the UFO. So is he in a temple in Nephi, Utah? Is he in a UFO? It seems to be the same principle. And this is, again, these absurd things that if you're going to make up a story, you're not going to say, oh, I went in a building. It was like 100 times the size in the building as well. It doesn't make any sense. So you see these parallels over and over again between the spirit world and the UFO world. And it all, I would say, is going to link back to consciousness. It's all consciousness. It's all within yourself. It's all happening in your consciousness. Here's Jean Kimura. I just interviewed her. She's in the book. She was taken in, where was she? In LA? No. She was on the West Coast somewhere with 2 other women. They were in a tent. She and a second woman were taken. The third woman, she said never talked to her again after this happened, was left in the tent for some reason. So they were taken to this craft, and they were shown this panel, and they said, where would you like to go? And so her and this other woman were going around the universe, and she actually said to them, well, how does this work? And he said, you have to see it inside yourself. It's within you. Think, imagine it in your head, and then push the button, and that's where we'll go. And she said they did it. Both her and this other woman were doing this. They would do this, imagine where they wanted to go, and they were going all over the place. And you see this again, the crossovers. If you take a look, I just did an interview, which I'll hopefully post on my Paranormal UFO Consciousness podcast with Ingrid Honkala, who worked for the U.S. Navy. She worked for NASA. She's an oceanographer, a PhD. She had a near-death experience when she's 3 years old, or just before 3 years old, in Colombia, where she grew up. And she tells the story again. You see this parallel. She says, I'm out of my body. I'm floating around, and I go to the housekeeper, and I see she's watching a soap opera. And then suddenly, I'm over my mother, and my mother is going to the bus stop. And my mother instantaneously knew something was wrong and turned around and started running back to the house. She had drowned in a pool in the back on the patio. And her sister was sitting there playing with her. And she said, and then my mother started running back, and I went, oh, okay. And then she said, I saw this dog at the end of the street. And I went, oh, a dog. I love dogs. And she said, instantaneously, she was with the dog. And then she saw this park off in the distance. And she said, oh, a park. And boom, she was instantly in the park. And she started to play this game. She'd see a tree. Boom, she'd instantly be at the tree. It was this idea. She was moving around instantaneously based upon where she wanted to go with her mind. It was all within her. She was doing this. So you see these parallels over and over again with these near-death experiences, with these abduction experiences, with all this kind of stuff, to show us this key component that we may have all this stuff wrong, and everything may be an activity inside consciousness. We want to turn it into nouns. We want to have, there's 7 levels, and there's this, and there's this, and there's colors, and there's this. There's nothing. There's just one thing. It's just consciousness. And as Deepak Chopra says, everything is an activity inside consciousness. There are no nouns. As soon as someone starts describing nouns, it's wrong. It's a verb. It's all alive. It's all, and it's almost like, as I describe now, God did not create the heaven and the earth. God created the sparks of the divine, and the sparks of the divine created the heaven and the earth. We are creating the universe with thought. It's all made out of consciousness. We are creating it. We create the good and we create the bad. We create the duality. It is up to us, but it's this world, and we're making this interesting Hollywood movie, and God is watching this thing, but it's all there. The idea that there's an out there, there's some Illuminati that's going to eat us, or evil aliens or whatever. We're creating it all. It's all us creating what's happening inside of us, and it's all done with consciousness. Consciousness is primary. Here's this 360-degree vision thing, which you'll see over and over and over again. And I didn't even know this existed until I started looking at this whole thing. This is another one of the things that I think has been totally ignored. It's extremely important, and that is the blindfold reading. I've encouraged the kids in Australia. They actually started an Olympic team. I said, we need to promote this thing, because basically what you have is a small kid who's maybe 5 or 6 years old. You can teach a kid, put a blindfold, and these are very high-end blindfolds. If you ever seen how they work, there's no way you can see out of these things. You can put on a kid 5, 6 years old, or 4 or 5, 6 years old. Within a couple of minutes, the kid can see colors. You can have kids reading books with blindfolds on, and people say, that's not possible. No, it's garbage. They're peeking. No, it's the whole idea. Where is the consciousness? Where are you actually seeing out of your eyes? This absolutely proves you're not seeing out of your eyes. And what they show is, this is Rob Freeman, my friend, that you can take a colored piece of paper, and the person can sit on it and determine what color it is, put it behind your head, above your head, and it's not looking at a certain area. It's this 360-degree vision that the consciousness is not being seen through the eyes, almost like the near-death experience thing, where they did the study with 33 people who were blind, and they had, I remember the percentage was 13 people who had never seen in their life had a near-death experience, and they could see, and they'd never seen it in their life. And that's the whole idea. What's actually doing the seeing? This is extremely important. It keeps getting ignored. There's groups all around the world. It was actually invented by the Indonesian military. This whole idea that take guys and put bags over their head and throw them out of planes, and they had to operate with these blindfolds on. It just proves conclusively that you can see. And the other thing to report with these kids that I've interviewed, some of these kids, where as soon as you have it, you also you can see things in the future, where you can be driving along with the blindfold and you know something's coming around the corner. Watch out, something's coming. And this is the whole idea. It's all tied together, but consciousness is not in the brain. I just put this one because it's kind of, I just found it, and I thought it'd be kind of interesting for people who are into the whole thing about what's going on with the government. This is Senator Barry Goldwater. I got his entire collection of papers from the University of Arizona. 1981, he said, relative to your question about the accuracy of the details in the Roswell incident, that was a book written by Bill Moore in 1980. It got the whole thing going. He was head of the Senate Intelligence Committee. So now you got Senate Intelligence Committee working on. Barry Goldwater's head of the Senate Intelligence Committee in 81. They are partially true. The Roswell story is partially true, but not completely. I can't give you any other answer other than that. So please don't push it. That's in a Barry Goldwater level. I just want to stick that. Here's the beings. They're coming out with a documentary. I think it's coming on Google, whatever. I don't follow these services, but it's coming out, and there's a book. I was helping put the book together, but I'm sort of strapped down with a bunch of stuff that I didn't get it. So they're going to do the book. These are two women with dyslexia in Great Britain, and you'll see a lot of people have dyslexia, a lot of experiences of dyslexia, almost like that's the part that triggers these people are into this other world. And these are called the beings. These are the ones, either I interviewed them or somebody interviewed them, and we said, because you see they got no faces, and that's the whole concept, is they don't want you to see them as human beings. They're just beings. They call themselves the beings. And I remember either I asked them or somebody else asked them, hey, are you an extraterrestrial? Are you extraterrestrials? And what they responded was, oh, do you want us to be extraterrestrials? We could do that. We could be extraterrestrials. We could even take you to our planet if you want. But no, we've always been here. You're the visitor. And you see this over and over again. And these are the beings. When this documentary comes out, you'll see it over and over again. They just say, it's an illusion. Get it through your head. It's an illusion. Everybody's dead. It's all an illusion. It's all just, it's happening. You're creating this thing. Sit back and enjoy it. And that comes to this whole idea that's now starting to move in the scientific community. So it's starting to come together, is this idea of the simulated universe. But in the simulated universe, oh, there's somebody running a computer. No, it's the sparks of the divine that are running and creating this whole simulated universe thing. But you'll start to see this, and a lot of experiencers are dealing with beings who are starting to talk about this idea, almost like they wouldn't talk to us in 1940s, 50s, 60s, because we wouldn't know what the heck they're talking about. But now they're starting to talk about this. This idea, it's an illusion. It's all being created in the mind. Here's one message. Here's what they said. This is from the beings. And there's actually two women who are in contact getting messages from the same beings. There is no good or bad, just experiences, even though it may not seem that way. The earthly realm is an illusion, which you and all other humans chose to create to comprehend the meaning of energy. No human has the power to extinct the earthly realm. No need to fear the experiences that humans chose for themselves. Enjoy and have fun in this puzzle called life. That had to do with a vision that I had, that I asked them. I said, hey, can the government actually do this? You'll hear about it down the road. I'm not really sort of talking about now, but I said, can the government actually do this? And I had this sort of encounter, and that's when they said, it's all illusion. I mean, you keep forgetting the plot here. It's all illusion. I knew that, and they sort of brought me back to reality and said that's the way it works. Here's Nancy Tremaine. I helped her publish her first book, and I wrote the foreword to her second book. She was the first to encounter the Greys publicly. She's written 2 books on the subject. She was taken in July of 1961. This is what she wrote in the middle of the night. Realities or illusions are part of the delusion that we have created. We are living in a delusional illusion of our making. We are players in this fictional theater that we perform for our creators, a muse existing for our audience. The stage is set at birth, and our performance has begun. She wrote that, woke up, and it was on a piece of paper beside her. That admits the quote that I always use now: all the world's a stage, all the men and women and aliens are but actors. They have their entrances and exits, and each man plays many roles. You are not the actor on the stage. You are playing an actor on the stage. Big difference. You are the one that's watching. You are the observer floating above the body, and the little actor is lying in the bed. We have to keep this in mind. We are in charge of the whole thing. It's all within us. It is all an illusion. This is Desta Barnaby, who's written 2 channeling books. And when I go back and look at her channeling books, I would suggest people read my assistant Desta Barnaby's channeling books. She is right. I could not believe. Here's what she said. I went to look it up. It is all an illusion you have made with your mind. Everything you see now, know it is you, and you gain control, and you can have what you want. It is endless because you are eternal. And the concept is, when you realize you're creating it, you get control of it. If you are the victim, then you are the victim. You float around like a cork going down a stream. Once you realize you are the one that's creating the illusion, you have a chance to change it because you're the one creating it. Now here, let's get rid of this thing here. Here's this question about Jesus with the Pharisees. He was asked by the Pharisees, when will the kingdom of God come? Jesus answered to them, the kingdom of God is not coming with something observable. No one will say, look here or there. And that's this whole idea. Is it out there? For this, you see, the kingdom of God is within you. And this is the mistake we're making. We're believing this is out there thing we're seeing through our eyes and this sort of stuff. And Jesus, it goes back 2,000 years where Jesus said, no one will say, look here or there, for the kingdom of God is within you. And that goes back to this idea. It's all in consciousness, and it may not take any space. It's like the singularity. It's like the whole thing about, oh, how did the universe get created? Oh, it came out of a singularity, came out of nothing. And I go, yeah, come on, let's give you a head shake. Like, how does this work? What's a singularity? Well, it's something doesn't obey the laws of time, physics. And this is what it may be, a singularity. It's one singularity, and you are the singularity, and it's all within you. You created it. And you go from lifetime to lifetime, you just go back in there and you create another thing, and you come out, create another game to play. And we just go through this over and over again, and we are the creators of the universe. The Seth channel again, the responsibility for your life and your world is yours. It has not been forced upon you by some outside agency. You form your own dreams and you form your own physical reality. The world is what you are. It is the physical materialization of the inner self which have formed it. Again, you see this over and over again now, that this idea that we are creating this physical universe. Here's Jim Semivan, who had the experience with the beings. And here's what he says. People will say, well, you know, these bad guys or whatever. It's very important. I think you should listen to Jim Semivan. He's very honest and he's trying to come to grips with what happened to him. And here's what he said. How do you make any sense of it when there does not appear to be any there? The phenomena seems to work on another level, consciousness, dimension, unknown to our science. There does not appear to be any there. It all just sort of dissolves. And here's a guy who probably knows more than you and I. He's got some contacts. He's good friends with Kit Green and all the guys in the Invisible College and all these guys. He's had some conversations. He's never really expressed what he means by that, but it's this whole idea that the physical world starts to fall apart. The DMT experiment. So I had a friend who's an AI expert. I remember him phoning me up one day and he said, hey, I had an abduction experience. I had doing DMT. I had this classic abduction experience. I said, you had a classic abduction experience? And I knew this Strassman, when he did the experiment, that he kept it very secret. These people were talking about having these encounters with beings. And he kept it secret because he couldn't grasp it. And he'd say to people, hey, do you think you were abducted? And they'd say, no, I don't think I was abducted. And they were on a table. They were watching them. They gave them that it's like a 10-minute session or whatever. So Strassman knew they weren't going anywhere. They were on the bed. And so I asked my friend, I said, well, tell me about it. He said, well, I was on the table and they were working on my head. He said, I could see their arms. I couldn't see them, but it looked like beings. And I was there. And this is the whole thing. So he's in the classic abduction experience, which apparently 25% of all the DMT people also experience, is the classic abduction experience of being operated on or being on a table and that sort of thing. And he didn't go anywhere. He was lying on a couch for 10 minutes. He didn't go anywhere. So where actually was he? And this is this concept. He went within, the same as the out-of-body experience goes within. It's all within. He went within himself and had that experience. And it's very plastic, and you can create whatever you want. So let's get going because we want to get everything here. I got so much material. John Wheeler, the universe does not exist out there, independent of us. Now, John Wheeler is the guy that came up with the black hole theory and the wormhole theory. He's not a stupid guy. He was at Princeton. He was after Einstein, and he also came up with the very bizarre idea there's only one electron. And that gets into the same sort of thing. Do you really know what's going on? When Wheeler said, hey, I think there's only one electron that's moving back and forth in the universe, there is only one electron. So he said, the universe does not exist out there, independent of us. We are inescapably involved in bringing about that which appears to be happening. We are not only observers, we are participators. In some strange sense, this is a participatory universe. And that's the point. We are creating the universe. We're creating it. We are the thing. And nothing comes into physical until it's observed. It's this idea that we are manifesting physical reality. However, this is done through heavier vibration or whatever. We are the ones that are running the show. Here's Niels Bohr. Everything we call real is made of things that cannot be regarded as real. Now, Niels Bohr won the Nobel Prize for the atom, for the quantum atom. He should know what he's talking about. And what happened is all these early guys were idealists. They believed that consciousness is primary. And when we got to World War II, then suddenly it was technology. And we moved away from this consciousness thing. And we got into, hey, what's the technology? How do these things fly? How's that metal work? And we go into this whole thing about, is there a buck in it for me? And can we get, cheaper gas? And can we go in for a weekend trip to Mars and stuff like that? It becomes this sort of physical thing that takes over. But the early guys believed that consciousness was primary. Paul Selleck is one that I watch very, very closely. They say ultimately there is only one note being played in the universe, and it's being articulated in different form. So it's really saying everything is a source of God or whatever you want to call that power that you may know, vibration, whatever you want to name it. It is as everything. Is that? No, it's not making any sense. It's just one oscillation. He said it's one note played in various levels to infinite levels. It's all one note. It's the same idea. There's only one electron. John Wheeler called Richard Feynman one day and said, Feynman, I know why all electrons have the same charge and the same mass. Why? Said Feynman. Because they're all the same electron. Our universe evolved from a singularity, a point of infinite density and gravity, and that before this event, time, space did not exist. The same would apply to our point of consciousness, that it's all a point of singularity, and that when you get out of it, the time and space do not exist. We assume this, that all this is there. We're only seeing this very small spectrum of reality, and we've got to always remember that. We think we've got it all figured out, like Max Planck's professor in 1874 said, "Hey, Max, don't go into physics. We got it all figured out. You're wasting your time." And of course, that was total nonsense. Here's again, this is Ingrid Honkala. I would absolutely advise you to listen to what she says, because she's a top-notch scientist who told me some of the stuff she did to the US Navy. Wherever I put my mind, I could go. Time and space had vanished for me. I could be anywhere at any time. Saw a dog at the end of the street, was instantly there. Saw a tree, was instantly there. Edgar Mitchell, this is this whole thing where they did these, the experiment where with the 3,200 experiencers, and it was run. A lot of people say, "Oh, the data isn't very straight." I don't think the data. It was done by John Climo. John Climo did 220 PhD dissertations. He chaired them. He was also a reader on 150 dissertations on how to gather data. The material in the free survey is correctly gathered. This guy had 370 dissertations he did, according to people who had to know how to put the data down. He would correct people's papers about how to correct the data. So they did the experiences. Here's what you find. Healing, 50%. And you have in the near-death experience, other things, healed from lung problems. That was Honkala. Orbs, 67% of experiencers see orb. Honkala saw a blue orb in the shower. That's when she started to see the energy beings. The energy beings are the number one being seen in the free survey, 55%. So she saw this blue orb, but she said, "Oh, these are blue meanies. They're the bad guys." And I said, "It was bad." No, it wasn't bad. It was really revolutionary to her experience. Dead people. Whitley Strieber's wife read the 200,000 letters with the secretary and came into Whitley and said, "Whitley, whatever we're dealing with here has something to do with death." Dead people, 76% of experiencers see dead people on board the ship. They're more psychic. This is with Honkala with the near-death experience, same thing. Brilliant light, 52%. Honkala, yes. Mystical being identified voice. Same thing with Honkala, had the voice. Near-death experience, this is the other bizarre one where people say, "Oh, it's just random. You just got grabbed off the street by some alien, he abducted you, whatever." So you have that random event, and then you find out that 37% of all people who randomly were abducted off the street also randomly have near-death experiences, and most of them have 2 near-death experiences. So what's the chances that somebody's going to have a random abduction experience and then a random near-death experience, or are they coming to the earth to create a reality with their mind that says, "Oh, I have a near-death experience. I can learn something from that, and I'll also be an experiencer, and I'll learn something from that." So you have that out-of-body experience I mentioned before. 80% of all experiencers have out-of-body experiences. Love and oneness was the main message to Honkala and to a lot of the different modalities, near-death experience and OBEs and stuff. 54% of experiencers were talking about oneness and love, and that doesn't make any sense. The alien is going to talk to you about oneness and love. Past life memory, yes, in both cases. Sensitive to other realities, yes. Along with those blindfold kids, they're sensitive to other realities as once they put those blindfolds on. At peace, yes. Quiet. Honkala said she would lock herself in bedrooms and closets to try to get away from the noise, to regain this silence. Ghosts or spirits. 76% of experiencers had seen ghosts or spirits, and of course Honkala sees them all the time. Desire to help others, 51%, and Inga Honkala, that's her main mission. She believes is here to help people. And I'll just get into a little bit of this stuff, because this negative stuff that's going around about the Skinwalker Ranch and these hitchhikers, and this is terrible, and we're victims, and it's not our consciousness, it's these evil things that are doing stuff. So this is my friend Ron Johnson, and I talked to him, and I knew this already, so I asked Ron, I said, "Hey, you ever have a hitchhiker come with you?" And he said, "Oh yeah." So he tells the story. He says he set up his camera in front of a big mausoleum. He does a lot of ghost hunting. "I pounded on the door of the mausoleum and invited it to come out for a photo." And he had the camera all set up. He says, "A black mass started to manifest between me and the mausoleum. And it gave me the hackles to stood up on my neck. I got one photo of it, then broke everything down and left. This black mass followed me home, and it took me over 5 years to finally get rid of it. It had followed me to 3 different homes that I had moved into." And this is the whole point. So the Skinwalker Ranch book plays all these evil things that are following people home. Anybody who has done paranormal phenomena knows that unless you guard yourself, unless you're going to get a hitchhiker. It's very common in paranormal phenomena, ghost hunting and stuff like that, where the phenomena follows you home. And Jacques Vallée, there's another interesting thing where you see these crossovers. Jacques Vallée discovered that many gifted remote viewers also had UAP type experiences going back to their childhoods. When it turned out that many of these subjects had experienced UFOs, they brought me into the project on a strictly confidential basis to document that aspect of the problem, Jacques Vallée told Brent Rains. So this is the whole thing. They understand this concept that there's this connection across. In fact, one high-level intelligence guy, I put a message to see whether he actually said this, and what they said was, because we cannot control the phenomena, we watch the people that the phenomena affects. And there may be visitors, however defined. And this is the whole idea, that you have to listen to the experiences. They're the ones interacting. What we're doing now is we're doing Rendlesham Forest. Rendlesham Forest is a UFO sighting. Time to get over it. Oh, we're looking at the Nimitz. The Nimitz is a UFO sighting. Time to get over it. We gotta quit looking at the entertainment. 100 years ago, we used entertainment. We used seances to entertain people. Like, oh, we got nothing to do today. Let's bring in some dead people. Now we're doing the UFO thing. You got a good photo? You got a good video? You got a good story? And we've heard the Nimitz thing. It's just a UFO sighting. You've got to talk to people interacting with the phenomenon. You start to realize, oh, this person was flying the craft. And they'll all say the same thing. Wherever I decided, the 747 airline pilot said, I had the dream 1 year. And then he says, and then a year later, I told Joe Burks, hey, I had that dream again. And Joe said, you better record this, because this is something going on. This is not a dream. And that's what everybody said. When I talked to the U.S. Air Force retired colonel in L.A., I said, you flew F-16s? He said, yeah. And then I said, hey, come tell me your story. He said, oh, I think it was a dream. I said, everybody thinks it's a dream. Just come tell me your story. It was the same thing. He's standing in the craft. He's standing there. There's beings behind him. He doesn't know what they are. And I tends to indicate it may be soul guides behind him. And he's standing there, and he's standing in the middle of the craft. And here's this voice that says, okay, go ahead and do it. And he says, I don't know what to do. You know what to do. Just do it. And he walks over to this panel, and he puts his hands on the panel. And he said, suddenly, it's like he's flying that F-16. Suddenly he's flying the craft. And he's going, what the heck's going on here? And then he takes one hand off the panel, and he's waiting for the craft to stall. And then he takes his other hand off the panel, and he figures it's going to stall, but he keeps it a couple inches off so he can slam it back down on the panel to start the craft again. And he says he's got both hands off the panel, and whatever he's thinking is what it's doing. It's flying around. And you see this over and over again. So this book will be coming out, and it starts to show you this power of consciousness, that this may all be consciousness. The physical world is this sort of programmed world that we live in, and the more we live that conscious world, the physical world, the less we're going to understand. But when you can break that down and realize it's all consciousness, it's all this simulated universe thing, we can start to figure things out. This is and they understand this. This is what I point out. They understand this. This is Diana Pasulka talking about going to this field where my friend actually showed Tyler D where this field was. And she talked about it. They were treating it like it was sacred. So you have this high-level NASA guy who is treating it like it's secret. When we went out there, we prayed. They were just praying. So I went along with it. Every time Tyler goes out there, he puts up an altar. There are a bunch of these altars out there, some put up by him and some by other people. And it's on a government site with a fence. It is a sacred place. That's why I call it the sacred place. And they talk about the gifting, that the material is gifted. So a lot of the people inside the government, even though they may not say it, understand this concept. This is not as physical as you think it is. And that may be what the cover-up is, because it's a physical world. And if they suddenly say the world isn't what you think it is, it's not important, all the stuff you're rape, pillage, kill, and steal to get your toys, and you put that forward, everything is going to fall apart. And then you have to kill the national $800 billion national security budget, because you're going to have to say we're all one, we're all connected. And that's the kind of message that they may be actually covering up. It's going to be, as I said, it's going to be a lot less physical than people think it is, a lot more spiritual than people think it is. It's going to be 1,000 times more complex than people think it is, and it will not have a hint of capitalism. It will be like a beehive mentality, a Super Bowl team where everybody, like all the cells in a body, all work together to make things one. Injuries. I'll just go through the injuries quickly. I got 2 minutes left here. Injuries. So they're talking about these injuries, 200 injuries. My number one question would be, how do you get 200 people who got injured? They're all military people. My number one question is, were they carrying a gun when they got injured? And so they're using the military people because they can get their medical records. Go back to Bigelow. What did Bigelow say? There was no injuries on Skinwalker Ranch, no major injuries when he had the Skinwalker Ranch. Didn't happen. So how do you have 200 military guys getting injured? And Bigelow said, nobody got injured when I had it. Fugel says the same thing. Fugel says no, except for that one case where the guy sort of took on the intelligence. There was really no injuries, but both Bigelow and Fugel have indicated, Fugel more than Bigelow, that it has a reflective quality to it, that whatever you bring on. And so when Fugel goes in to the ranch, they pray as they're coming into the ranch, because you realize you're going to manifest. If you decide you're gonna have you're up against the Skinwalker and it's evil, you're gonna manifest this. You are in charge. So they do this. George Knapp said, those that were the most aggressive to the phenomena had the worst experiences. It's this reflective quality. You are creating the world around you. It's not some evil alien out there that's doing this kind of stuff. We are creating it. The military, and this comes to the Rendlesham Forest. I'm supposed to be interviewing John Burroughs, and the number one question I have with John Burroughs, because they're one of the people reported that John Burroughs pulled a gun. Now, John said he didn't believe he had the gun out there. There's another case of a woman that had a nervous breakdown at Rendlesham Forest. She had a gun as well, according to Holt. She was in her car. She had this gun. The object came through the car, and she ended up having a nervous breakdown. And that's the whole deal: is, are there guns? If you decide you're going to a CE5 and take a gun along, you could be in some trouble. They don't seem to like guns. They don't seem to like missiles, and they sure as hell don't seem to like nuclear weapons. This is the whole thing, is when people say a person is injured, you got to ask, what was the circumstances behind it? Did it have a gun? And I can give you the example that in the Stanton Friedman files, the one case I had, and I'll sort of end with this slide. They had U.S. Navy intelligence out of Florida had picked up an intercept of a UFO coming into Cuban airspace. And they tracked this whole thing. And one guy reported to Stanton Friedman. They went to the National Enquirer. They filed an FOIA on it. The group that was against UFO secrecy actually went and challenged the U.S. National Security Agency and said, unless we get the records from this, we're going to the Cuban embassy. They got a visit from the FBI that afternoon, scared the living daylights out of the guy. This is a very serious case the U.S. Navy intelligence got. And what happens is the craft is coming in, and they order the craft to turn, to identify itself. The craft keeps coming in. There's two jets. The wingman is the one that gets the final word. They say, take it down. They lock on, and according to the wingman, he starts screaming, "It's gone! It's gone! The craft, the plane just disintegrated. It's gone!" And that's what I would maintain. If you want to hunt the Skinwalker, be prepared to be hunted. It's reflective. It's what you put out, you get back. And last thing I would put down is, people are talking about, why the Navy? Why are these UFOs interfering with the Navy? And I would quote Lou Elizondo, who said about the Nimitz carrier group in one interview, it had more nuclear power than the entire state of New York. They have nuclear reactors powering these ships. They have nuclear weapons. They have these submarines. So you have the whole nuclear carrier, and that may be why these engagements are taking place with the military, because the Air Force doesn't have nuclear stuff, doesn't have nuclear planes. All the nuclear stuff is in the Navy. I'll leave it at that, and we'll maybe...
Wait, Grant, I just have a few questions, because it's so... I agree with most of what you're saying, and it does seem to be all emanating from whatever consciousness is. But how do we ever learn anything new? And how do we gain control if it's all us out there and we're doing things? How do we access control over the world we're creating? Because it seems to be happening. Yeah.
Well, you realize you're creating it. So whatever, it's like, so everything that happens is, why would I manifest this? Instead of seeing it a random event. Oh, why would I do this? You know, if it's a good, bad thing or whatever. And it's the idea that any people, you can see everything as good or bad. Like, one person will have an experience, one will see it as good, some will see it as bad. But if you realize that you are the creator, that you are creating what's happening around you, it's hard to get into it to try to get control of it. But that's basically what it comes down to: is you are creating, I am creating, And there's no out there. There are no people influencing us. We are the ones that are, even you're bringing these people in to teach you a lesson, that you have this engagement with somebody. If you read Michael Newton, it goes in the same thing, that you and I and Neil all sat down before we were born and said, oh, we're going to do this thing. Neil's going to run this thing, and Grant's going to come on, and then this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And if we realized that it may all have been planned. Even my assistant, Desta, had the word was given to her. She was really upset. Like, forget it. What are you fighting? I mean, you made all this stuff. You created all this stuff. You created this we before you came into the world. And she said, no. She didn't believe that. And they stopped talking to her. And she went for a month. I think she was back and forth trying to get. She couldn't believe this idea that no, it was her. There was all this, and it's all happening. And I think the creation is done. We make the choices before we come in as to who we're going to play, what we're going to learn, and stuff like that. But a lot of it is predestined, and a lot of it is us doing it.
So the big question is, how do we get in touch with that part of us that has made all those decisions? Because you say you created this. It's not the personality. It's you.
Well, okay. I'll give you the answer. The personality is the ego. The personality is the little voice that's talking and saying, this is, Grant's full of it. This is not true. This is, it's the noise in the signal. So what do they say? I do it in contact modalities. All 70 contact modalities is the same thing. It's the ability to shut down the left brain ego, the one that's creating the noise in the signal. Be quiet and still, be still and know that I am God. You sit there and you be quiet. And if you can get that signal, you pick up the signal. That's all channelers are doing. That's all people are doing. You do hypnosis. You're quieting the mind. No, you're not. You're quieting the noise in the signal. So you can pick up the signal. And that's when you make the contact. And we're so much into the physical world with the ego running the show that we can't break off. We can't get into that zone. And that's what meditation, that's what all contact modalities are about, is getting quiet. And that you'll see this with near-death experience with Hunkalai, where she says it was absolutely silent. It was there, and her whole life she's trying to get back to that silence. That it was all there. She was completely in the field, and people who have near-death experiences are completely in the field because their left brain is completely shut out of it. It's completely shut off through trauma or through whatever. That's what it is. It's this idea that you have to. The stillness is there. You have to go. That's where everything is happening, but it's very hard to do.
Wait, I want just one more question. If everything is set, then is there any way to create more unknown? Isn't it our job to move into creation and create new possibilities?
Well, that's the whole idea, that the basic format is set as to who you, but I still think most people will say that there still is the free will, that you can still vary it based upon your decisions as you move along. So the free will debate, I would still say on the free will debate, yeah, you have some choices, but there is a pattern set as to who you're going to meet and what's going to happen. And subconsciously you're bringing all this stuff on where you need this, or you imagine being sick and then you become sick, or you imagine,
becoming rich.
And you become, or whatever, that you got to relate the mind, as Edgar Cayce said, the spirit is the life, the mind is the builder, and the physical is the result. That was 100 years ago. He said that. Mm-hmm. And all the channelers are saying the same thing. You hear it over and over again. You are the builder. You are creating it. And it's this conscious world. And we're starting to get away from it because we were starting to realize that consciousness may be primary. 10 years ago, when I had my download experience, people thought I was nuts. They thought I had absolutely lost it. But now people are starting to talk about this, especially with the simulated universe, that it may not be a physical world. Everything may be a desktop icon, that what you see in the physical world is not, it's just reflective of the real reality that you can't see. Or the idea of people I'll give you one last example. The guy who started Pixar movies, he wrote a book called The Pixel something, and he talks about the pixel. So you say, what's a pixel? And you say, oh, a pixel, when you get the film, you blow up the film and it's these little squares. He said, no, it's not a pixel. A pixel is a one-dimensional thing in space. You cannot see a pixel. And what they do is they take these spreaders that are used in the brain and they're used in holograms and stuff, and they spread the pixel. And then they take 40 of those and they put them in these little boxes. And that's how they have a photograph. But we think a pixel is a thing. You cannot see a pixel. You cannot see anything in reality. Everything you're seeing is a desktop icon in the way. You're not driving the video car. You're driving, you think, but there's something way behind it. The reality is unseen. You can never see reality. You can only see these things that we create, that we play, our little video games and our little bodies.
Grant, if we were outside our bodies and interdimensional extraterrestrial, we were looking down at us humans, would we just see them as energy fields then, or no house, like nothing exists?
Well, the people that are in the field will describe themselves as like a ball of light, a spot of light, where you see the orbs and stuff like that. But again, you're going within your body to see yourself. You're having this impression because your body is inside yourself. So the awareness leaves the body inside yourself and looks around and can go wherever it wants and do whatever it wants. And people always will tell you with out-of-body experiences, they can literally do whatever they want. They can make everything manifest whenever they want. They can move around. And that's this idea that it can't be a physical thing where we're moving through time and space. It's got to be this thing. It's there's no space and time. So how long does it take to go from here to the other side of the universe? You can do it instantaneously because it's all in the same point of space.
Right.
Wow. Great. Beautiful. I mean,
Thank you so much, brother.
I'm gonna call you this big Grant. So I want to continue this conversation.
Fantastic.
You're going to be back here for the panel in a few hours, right? In 4
Yes,
hours
I will.
from now. All right, cool. We'll continue.
But it's an ET panel, so try to pretend there are ETs out there. No.
All the world's a stage. All the men and women and aliens are but actors. Yes. Okay.
Well, let's call a few of them in.
Thanks for that, Grant.
That's almost
Brilliant.
like having to pretend that humans exist. It's
Well, that's the
paradoxical.
thing. They're pretending to be aliens, and we're pretending to be humans. We are not humans. We are not the actor on the stage. We are playing an actor on the stage. Yeah,
Right.
as Paul Salinger, one of them said, "You got to remember who you actually are. You got to remember you are the voice, the silence between the words. You are not the words. You are not the human. You are watching the human. You are that which does not change."
Yeah. Well,
Oh my gosh.
Whitley says that the ETs exist beyond time and space from that field of infinite consciousness. So that's
Well,
what
yeah,
he's saying
they can manifest themselves the same as we can. We can be whatever we want as well. I mean, that's the whole idea. When we leave, we can say,
Right.
"Okay, I'm coming back as a gray," or you can be whatever you want. But it's still a play. It's still not a physical. It's still a thing which made out of consciousness.
Great.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you, Grant.
Sorry to run late. We'll take some questions.
Thank you,
later.
Grant.
All right, we'll see you in a
Fantastic.
bit.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks.